The planet Aegor was the crown jewel of Greshian civilization, a floating metropolis of sleek towers and glowing spires. The Greshians, an advanced and orderly species, prided themselves on their flawless system of governance, technology, and daily life. Everything in their society was calibrated for maximum efficiency, no movement wasted, no action unnecessary. It was a system so finely tuned that even the concept of surprise had become foreign to them. Until the humans arrived. It started as a diplomatic mission. The Greshians had encountered many alien species over their centuries of exploration, but none so peculiar as the humans. Representatives from Earth were invited to Aegor as part of a cultural exchange program. To the Greshians, this was a standard practice, an opportunity to observe and study another species. To the humans, it was a chance to learn and build alliances. Both sides were intrigued, but the differences in their civilizations quickly became apparent. From the moment the human delegation stepped onto the gleaming walkways of Aegor, their behavior perplexed the Greshians. The humans smiled and waved, an act that Greshians found unnecessary. They chatted amongst themselves in a seemingly erratic manner, their conversations jumping from topic to topic, never following the precise and logical patterns Greshians were accustomed to. But these eccentricities were nothing compared to what was about to unfold. On the morning of the third day, the human delegation requested to prepare their own breakfast. The Greshians, curious and unthreatened, granted them access to a small culinary space, though they rarely used such facilities themselves. In Greshian society, food was seen strictly as fuel. Their meals came in the form of carefully engineered nutrient pellets, consumed quickly and without fanfare. The idea of turning mealtime into a ritual or a source of enjoyment was utterly foreign. The Greshians watched remotely as the humans gathered ingredients from their stores: eggs, bread, butter, fruit, coffee. What followed was, to the Greshians, nothing short of chaos. The humans began cracking eggs into a hot pan, the sizzle of oil filling the air. Bread was placed into a toaster, and moments later, the sharp smell of browning crust began to waft through the room. Butter was spread in thick layers, fruit was sliced into uneven pieces, and coffee was brewed, its deep, bitter aroma flooding the space. Alarm spread through the Greshian observers. Their sensors picked up unfamiliar compounds in the air, warning signals blaring of potential biohazards. What were these creatures doing? Why were they wasting time and energy on such an inefficient process? Why combine so many different foods when a single nutrient pellet would suffice? The Greshians were baffled by what seemed to them like an incomprehensible indulgence. Unaware of the confusion they were causing, the humans continued, sitting down to enjoy their meal. They talked, laughed, and took their time, a slow, relaxed ritual that baffled their hosts. For the Greshians, this simple act of breakfast was about to spark a wave of confusion, debate, and disruption that would ripple through their entire society. The humans' breakfast, though seemingly innocent, was causing ripples of confusion among the Greshians. As the human delegation sat down to eat their carefully prepared meal, the Greshian observers were in complete disarray. The Greshian Council of Rationality, the governing body responsible for maintaining order and logical practices, had dispatched several scientists to monitor the event. What they witnessed defied everything they believed about efficient living. The humans had arranged their food in a way that seemed disorderly: eggs, toast, fruit, and a strange dark liquid they called coffee. Each item had been prepared separately, using different utensils and methods. The idea of preparing food individually rather than consuming a single, uniform nutrient source baffled the Greshian scientists. Why use heat to cook? Why not consume raw ingredients directly or, better yet, have the nutrient pellet synthesized to perfection? The inefficiency was glaring to their trained eyes. As the humans ate, they didn't do so quietly or with purpose. Instead, they talked. They laughed. They even paused mid-bite to continue their conversations, seemingly unaware of the time they were wasting. In Greshian culture, eating was a purely functional activity. Nutrient pellets were consumed in silence, usually alone, with no need for prolonged gatherings. Eating in public was rare, and talking while eating was unthinkable. To see the humans treating this meal as a social event was bewildering. The Greshian scientists tried to analyze the ritual. Perhaps, they hypothesized, the humans had evolved differently. Could their biology require this type of variety in food to sustain them? Maybe their brains needed the social stimulation during meals to function at peak efficiency? Or perhaps, and more disturbingly, the humans were simply irrational creatures who had yet to evolve beyond their primitive instincts. As the human breakfast continued, so did the waves of confusion. Several Greshians watching the live transmission from their homes were equally puzzled. News outlets picked up on the event, reporting the strange human behavior with growing curiosity. Was this breakfast some form of cultural performance? A symbolic ritual with deeper meaning? Or was it simply the humans indulging in their sensory desires, unbound by the rigid logic that defined Greshian life? Among the public, reactions were mixed. Some Greshians dismissed the breakfast as a bizarre alien custom, irrelevant to their advanced society. Others, however, were intrigued. The idea of food as more than just fuel was enticing to a small but growing number of citizens. Some even speculated that perhaps the humans had discovered something the Greshians had overlooked, an element of life that could enhance creativity, satisfaction, or even community. The Greshian Council of Rationality convened an emergency meeting to discuss the potential ramifications. Could the humans' chaotic breakfast lead to larger disruptions? Was this an isolated incident, or could it inspire a wave of curiosity and rebellion among the Greshians? The council decided to monitor the situation closely, though they remained confident that their society's adherence to logic would prevail. Meanwhile, the human delegation remained blissfully unaware of the storm they had unwittingly set in motion. To them, breakfast was just breakfast, a comforting start to the day, a moment of togetherness. As they cleaned up and prepared for the rest of their diplomatic duties, they had no idea that their simple meal had sparked debates, fueled curiosity, and sown the seeds of a cultural shift that would shake the foundations of Greshian society. For the Greshians, the question lingered: could something as simple as breakfast truly hold meaning beyond its basic function, or was this just another example of human irrationality? The aftermath of the human breakfast ritual sent shockwaves through Greshian society, igniting a wave of curiosity and confusion unlike anything the planet had experienced. What had started as an innocuous cultural exchange quickly became a subject of fascination, sparking heated debates across the entire Greshian system. On Aegor, the capital city, the humans' breakfast was dissected and analyzed in academic circles, news outlets, and even everyday conversations. The question that haunted the Greshians was simple: why? The Greshians had always lived by strict codes of logic and efficiency, believing that their highly structured way of life was the pinnacle of civilization. Nutrient intake had always been handled with precision. Each Greshian consumed their daily rations of nutrient pellets in private, quickly and without distraction. There was no need for taste or pleasure, food was merely fuel. Yet, the humans had treated their meal as something more. They had lingered over it, savoring the flavors, engaging in conversation, laughing and smiling as they ate. This behavior was incomprehensible to the Greshian mind. The footage of the human breakfast went viral almost immediately, spreading to the farthest reaches of the Greshian system. The images of humans frying eggs, brewing coffee, and toasting bread were analyzed in detail by scholars. Some scientists speculated that the humans had evolved differently and that their biology required a variety of nutrients, which might explain the complex and seemingly inefficient preparation methods. Others proposed that the humans were driven by irrational pleasure-seeking behaviors, something Greshians had long since evolved beyond. Despite the confusion, a small but growing number of Greshians became intrigued. For the first time in centuries, citizens began questioning their rigid adherence to efficiency. Was it possible that the humans were experiencing something more, something meaningful, through their indulgent and seemingly chaotic approach to food? Could it be that variety and sensory enjoyment played a role in well-being or even cognitive function? In the weeks following the breakfast, small acts of rebellion began to emerge. Some Greshians, mostly younger citizens, started experimenting with their nutrient pellets, adding subtle flavors or textures, much to the dismay of their elders. Social media channels buzzed with accounts of secret taste-testing gatherings, where Greshians would meet to share modified pellets that mimicked the complex flavors of human food. The appeal of these forbidden experiments grew rapidly, attracting more followers who longed to break free from the monotony of their daily routines. The Greshian Council of Rationality, the governing body responsible for maintaining societal order, quickly grew concerned. They had initially dismissed the human breakfast as an oddity, but the growing trend of indulgence could no longer be ignored. Council members convened in an emergency session to discuss the troubling rise in what they termed irrational behavior. They feared that the experimentation with food would lead to a broader breakdown of their culture's foundational values, threatening the very stability that had defined their species for centuries. To combat the spread of indulgence, the council launched a public information campaign to reinforce the importance of logic, discipline, and efficiency. Posters appeared throughout Aegor with slogans like, "Fuel, not pleasure," and "Order is strength." Public service announcements reminded Greshians that their way of life had brought them unparalleled prosperity, and straying from these values would lead only to chaos. But the curiosity that had taken root was difficult to suppress. The human breakfast had sparked something deeper within the Greshians, something that could not be easily extinguished. For the first time, they were beginning to question whether their strict, orderly way of life was truly the best path forward, or whether there might be room for a little chaos after all. As the ripple effect of the human breakfast spread across Greshian society, what had started as curiosity quickly grew into an ideological clash that threatened to fracture the very fabric of their world. The once harmonious and unified civilization was now divided into two opposing factions: the rationalists, who clung tightly to the traditional values of efficiency and logic, and the indulgers, who embraced the human way of life, particularly their approach to food and social interaction. The rationalists, led by the Greshian Council of Rationality, viewed the growing interest in human customs as a direct threat to their culture. They believed the pursuit of sensory pleasure was a distraction from their species' goals of progress and order. For them, efficiency was paramount, and every aspect of life, including food, was designed to minimize waste and maximize output. The indulgers, however, argued that the human ritual of breakfast represented something deeper, an acknowledgement of the richness of life, the importance of community, and the need for variety in even the smallest details. The tension between these two groups intensified as more Greshians began to experiment with flavors and textures in their nutrient pellets, or worse, abandon them altogether in favor of preparing more complex meals inspired by human recipes. Small, underground gatherings started to take place where Greshians met to share new culinary creations, discuss human culture, and debate the merits of their traditional ways. What had once been a tightly controlled society of order was now seeing the rise of informal, unsanctioned social events, something that hadn't existed in Greshian history for centuries. The Greshian Council of Rationality responded by implementing a series of increasingly strict laws. Flavored nutrient pellets were banned, and public eating spaces were shut down, forcing Greshians back into isolated consumption of their unflavored rations. The council also launched a propaganda campaign, reminding citizens of the chaos that could arise from indulgence, warning that their society's stability was at risk if they continued to stray from their disciplined ways. Public service announcements, broadcast across all channels, featured slogans like, "Efficiency is strength," and "Order is our way forward." Despite these efforts, the indulger movement only grew stronger. They saw the council's actions as oppressive, a denial of something fundamental to their existence that they had never realized was missing. What had begun with food expanded into broader discussions about personal freedom, creativity, and the nature of Greshian society itself. The human breakfast was no longer just a cultural oddity, it had become a symbol of rebellion, a call for change in a rigid world. Civil unrest began to brew. In some cities, protests broke out as the indulgers demanded the freedom to prepare their meals as they wished and gather together in public spaces. The rationalists, in turn, pushed back with force, deploying security drones and issuing curfews. Aegor, the once peaceful floating city, now teetered on the brink of a full-scale cultural war. Meanwhile, the human delegation watched the chaos unfold with a mixture of disbelief and guilt. They had never imagined that something as simple as their breakfast routine could spark such upheaval. What had been a comforting, everyday ritual for them had become the catalyst for a deep societal rift among the Greshians. As diplomats, they had hoped to foster understanding and cooperation between their species, not to inadvertently unravel the fabric of an entire civilization. With their diplomatic mission nearing its end, the humans prepared to leave Aegor, uncertain of the long-term consequences of their presence. As they boarded their ship and looked back at the gleaming spires of the city, they could feel the weight of what they were leaving behind, a society at war with itself, struggling to reconcile its rigid past with an uncertain future. For the Greshians, the debate continued to rage. Was the human breakfast a trivial indulgence, a meaningless distraction? Or was it a glimpse into something their species had lost, a connection to pleasure, to each other, to life itself? The answer would define the future of Greshian civilization.